I hear you.
You're not allowed to be in control of that.
Alrighty, good evening. Welcome to the June 4th Daniel Boone School District Budget Workshop meeting. Mr. Wolf is running late, so he asked me to kick off the meeting. So if we could all rise and say hi to Mr. Scott. If we could all rise and pledge the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I think in attendance tonight we have pretty much our full board except for Mr. Wolf is running late. Administration, we have, what do we have here? We have our full business office, plus Mr. Hurley's hanging out in the back there, and of course our superintendent is present. So who's running the show tonight? Is that Kathleen, is that you, or is that Mr. Small?
You going to start with your forecast, or you want me to start?
Is there an agenda? I don't know. Is there?
No.
No. Okay.
The reason I didn't prepare an agenda is because it was advertised as a workshop rather than a committee meeting,
Okay.
and it was for the purpose of budget. So I thought it was self-explanatory, we would be reviewing the budget. What I asked Kathleen to do in conjunction with the 5-year that's been circulated was to prepare a summary, which she distributed earlier, regarding all of the changes that have been made since the last budget meeting. So I'll let her take off from here, and then we can move into the 5-year projection that has been
Scott. Yeah, sure. All right. I don't know if you want me to talk into this, or...
Probably best, yeah.
No, it's not on. All right, the documents that are in front of you are the ones that I prepared before, the detail for the school that goes by school, and then department in the back. What I did on the front was I did just a summary of exactly what I reduced. The high school, there was a reduction in professional services subs. That was sent out in that email from Mr. Harris when we went through the initial, when we cut a lot of stuff out of the facilities budget as well. There were some summer reading books that had to be purchased. That was more of a timing and an accounting to get the accounting in the correct year. He was budgeting in the year in reverse, so we just put it back in the budget so he can have it for next year as well, because he purchases the book so late in the year. Facilities, we, because of the Birdsboro, the shutting down of Birdsboro, we went through and we assessed everything we can reduce with GCA and all the utilities. And then special ed, based on our numbers that are coming in and the closer that we get with tuition, I adjusted some dollars in there to more align correctly with where the tuition is. So I was able to reduce a little bit there. Technology, that was in the original email, that was a reduction of $37,000 for the firewall that they purchased this year. Now, when I was going through, I was noticing that the phone bills, the phone expense, it looks like we had a standard budgeting of $50,000 every single year, but we're coming in at about $65,000. So I made that more in line by increasing that line item. Transportation for tennis, lacrosse, and swimming, $14,500, and the increase in athletic budget for the supplies and everything discussed on that one sheet from Mr. Schmidt for tennis, lacrosse, and swimming. And then I had to correct a line item that was bothering Lauren, the $100 in debt. I had $100 off. So if you can see, I did adjust some of the budget numbers, 17, 18, closer to accurate, because we're coming in close here to the end of the year. I tried to make them as close as possible. Anything, we had $505,000 worth of expenses that came in that are taken straight from our basic ed subsidy. There are such things as BCIU transportation. It's a normal thing. It comes in a year I don't understand it, but we need to budget for it accordingly for next year, so we'll have it in the budget and accrue appropriately. That was taken into account for the beginning fund balance for his forecast. So basically, AEC remained the same, so did Monocacy and middle schools. I might have adjusted the 17-18 numbers to more closer to accurate, but nothing has changed in those budgets. For high school, like I said, the $2,000 and the $25,000 reduction in subservice. And then facilities, that's where the bulk of the money came out. And we also aligned his budget accordingly. Like I said, there was a lot of stuff that was budgeted all over the place, and we put it where it should be.
You said 17, 18, that's a pro forma number? Okay. And
Yes.
Like how far into the period are we looking, like as far as what portion of it is actual?
I would say that I ran the numbers this morning, and we tried to do, the POs are supposed to be done for every purchase, and that's the reason for the POs, is to make sure you can get a good number.
Yeah.
So as far as everything that's been encumbered and anything that's been expensed, I put the numbers together and come in close. If I see that there might be something missing, I mean, I've done it up until this weekend,
Okay,
a
so-
month off.
Yeah,
But they're all in there because I estimate up to the end. So you might look at an estimation for June, but that's about it.
which,
They're pretty
that's
close.
probably a low month for expenses anyway, right?
Yes, for most of them.
Yeah.
Probably the item that is the most volatile right now
The tuition.
is the tuition numbers for both special education and charter. And what we have tried to do is notify, is this on?
Yeah, we sent the letter out at the end of May.
A letter goes out to all the providers saying, you need to have your invoice to us by the end of July. School year ends June 30th, get your billing to us by the end of July so that when we do our audit, it's as accurate as can be. What we were having is entities that were sending us late invoices into November, December, January for the June 30th ending, and it really, some of those numbers are big numbers. So that's why we send this notification out in an effort. But to answer your question, how accurate is it? Those are the two that really come back to get you.
And just all in for 16, 17, what, where are we, I'm sorry, 17, 18, where are we all in relative to original budget?
That's the reflection of the fund balance, which is very close to where we started.
It doesn't
In
have to
fact,
be exact,
it's
it's an all-in
a
number.
little over, we were close to 5 million after the audit as a projected fund balance, beginning fund balance. And she's projecting now 5.3, so
Okay.
it's relatively close. 30,000 to 61.
Yeah. That's good.
Okay. Facilities, as I was saying, facilities was the one that, the numbers were kind of all over the place. He budgeted just year after year. So I think we've come through that budget and kind of moved the money where it's supposed to be more accurately. And then we cut a lot out of the BEC items. And that's that number of the 461,000. Okay. And then through technology, like I said, the 37,000 you knew about, and we took that out for this year so they can get a good head start on that. And then the phone budget, which is the 2860, the 531s. I broke it out by building, but then I also increased it because if you can see, it was 55,000, 63,000, but we had a consistent budget of 50,000 year after year. So we were low in that number. I don't know if that's a matter of maybe looking at that maybe a little closer. I have to get with Scott about that. We might be able to negotiate something different to decrease that, but I just want to make sure we're covered in case we can.
That's something we should look at. We should-
Absolutely, I think we
should
can
be-
renegotiate, like the cell phones and stuff. I think he just did that though, but I'm not 100%. Again, I did not have time to talk to Scott. I just discovered that over the weekend and this morning. that was a little low, and I just want to make sure we're covered. Nothing else in the technology, and special education, as the tuition numbers are coming close. Could I have left the 73,000 in there for next year? I could have, but I thought it'd be more accurate if I just reduced it to 73, just based on where we're at and where the bills are on some of the tuition numbers, so. Okay, and transportation, the only change in that was adding the 3 sports transportation number. Athletics, the only change in that was the adding of 3 sports, and that would be the supplies. Me and Mr. Schmidt went back over that based on the conversations that were here and the uniform schedule. And I mean, in the worst case scenario, I think the number was, it came out to 43 or 44,000 in expenses for the 3 sports. But that's if every year hit for uniforms, every year hit for some kind of equipment that needed to be purchased. But as Mr. Harris was explaining, that's what the Blazer Days are for and the fundraising. So there are opportunities there to decrease that number. And the chances of them hitting like that all at once are very slim to none, as long as it's properly planned.
Basically,
Oh, sorry.
basically Blazer
You're on.
Days, our annual carnival was started for a fundraiser for our activities and sports. So now that we're coming up on the 3rd year, we need to have those groups, athletic clubs, getting more involved with setting up booths, fundraisers, things like that. The first year, it was too far past the end of school. The year after, we were getting a little closer. Now we're right at the end of school. So the whole point was for them to set up booths, cheerleaders, football, baseball, soccer, track, they'll all set up fundraising, and that would be their big fundraiser for the year. Not doing the nickel and diming, selling candy bars or whatever during the year, but that would be the big one. So working with the foundation, we have to get those groups to help supplement their income, because our kids can raise a lot of money, as we know, but they need to get involved with the carnival. So that's what we're looking at doing, to offset some of the costs of supporting more of the athletic and clubs.
Are they going to be getting information out to the coaches? Because all of the coaches, I assume most of us have parent lists. We can do the emails out to, because I know right now we haven't received anything.
Yeah, working with George and also Lisa Kiki and Scott, who's president of the foundation.
Right. But each individual coach should have
Yeah.
a good list, because I don't know if the teams know that.
I don't think they know either, but that has to start at the beginning of each season when George does his coaches meeting. He needs to bring that up. This has to be part of what they do to help
This
raise
would be
funds.
a conversation for next year,
Right.
Right.
going into it.
I mean,
I'm going to say they don't.
yeah.
We can still salvage it. That's why we all have a bunch of email lists with parents' names on them.
All right. Any other questions?
If we want to ask questions, I'm sorry, do you want to go?
No, go first.
If we want to ask questions on particular things, I know at one point we talked about we could see some transportation savings if there was a staggered school start time. That was thrown out there, and then that was kind of not discussed. Perhaps it was. I missed the last meeting. Where are we at with that? Was that discussed?
It was discussed, but that's something we would have to roll out the following year.
Okay.
We can't change. I mean, we talked about later starting times, and I did a survey 2 years ago, and people were for a later starting time. However, staggered starting times is something that we could put in play, and we could eliminate 3 to 5 buses. But what we would need to know is, would those buses be utilized for overcrowding on other routes? Then we wouldn't really have a savings, although technically it would be a slight savings. So we could do that for next year. We would have to do some different routing scenarios, time changes, and bring something for next following school year.
That was my question too. I just wanted to make sure, sometimes when I use my own company, we talk about things and then next year comes, and I just want to make sure there's a plan in place to go down that path. Are we going to go down that path? So the answer is yes.
I guess where would we look at it? Is there a committee that it falls to, or?
Transportation.
Transportation,
Okay.
but it's basically once the routing is done for this year, Halloweenish, we could start running different scenarios time changes, just to see what it
It's a
looks
great
like.
idea. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer, but until you get into the math, sometimes it doesn't work out so easily, so, good point.
Before I leave that, I did have a question on the transportation for the sports that we're adding. Didn't we pay for the transportation this year?
Yes,
So is that something we really need to add, or was it already there?
we didn't. It was taken
Wasn't.
out of the budget. It was out of, not in the budget for 18-19 when it was discovered that it wasn't supposed to be there.
But you're increasing the amount, isn't it in the actuals that you're looking at?
Yeah, but it's in the actuals for 17-18, but it's not in the budget for 18-19.
Right, but you're increasing the actuals, it included the actuals for 17, 18, and you're increasing the budget.
BC wasn't in either budget, it
You're
was
saying
paid
that
for.
line item.
Right, but
So-
We hit the
That
action.
line.
there are last number for
There's
the,
the act.
That money was
There's no
budgeted
need to
for.
raise the
Right.
next year's budget.
Exactly.
It's not matching.
Oh, okay. When this says budget right there for 17-18, that's almost like your actual.
right.
So I put it in that one and then I put it in
Oh, you put it in both, okay.
For transportation?
the cost. I did put that in there.
Okay, the cost did increase for transportation versus this year.
Yes.
Yeah, the costs have increased for transportation this year versus next year.
So there is a slight increase from one year to year because based on the
That's
contract,
fine.
it's
So you
3%.
added it into this, the
Yes.
actions.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
That makes sense? Okay.
I have a question about the supply numbers for AEC and NEC. So I get that they're theoretically going up because we're not gonna have Birdsboro, so, but there should be, with those going up, wouldn't there be an offset, to some of that cost? You know, there should be a Birdsboro line going down, and I feel like the Birdsboro line is just kind of going away, which means that if we're adding $30,000 to NBC, we're really adding more than that because there's no negative to offset the add. Like in other words, the year over year should be, let's just, all things being equal, the year over year numbers for NBC and BEC would be flat. But they're not going to be because we're now closing BEC,
Right.
right? So that those numbers should go up.
Which school's picking up all the foods?
Well, both.
Both of them.
Well, but
Well,
NBC's going to end up with
NBC.
the, NBC's going to have the largest
You're not
increase.
going to get the larger?
Larger increase, yeah. I mean, theoretically, NBC, or AEC's going to
But
be
Amity
pretty
had the
close to the
largest,
same.
Amity had the larger increase.
I was gonna say, there's, you're talking about one grade, so I don't even think the pickup isn't that big.
Amity had the larger increase in.
It would be a larger increase in NBC, but it's not like they're adding
The fifth grade.
300 credits.
So that's all on the
AEC will have a fairly similar number to what they had this year. It'll be a little higher. No, it's going to be comparable.
But there's
So-
also those readers that are in there as well.
There are consumables that are
There's
part
some
of that.
reading material that we're purchasing, Mr. Hurley had
And they're not
explained.
in the books. They're not in books as a separate.
They're consumables. That's a consumable
So it's
type of
not,
thing.
books is a, I keep it, consumable is a supply.
Yes,
Is that the idea?
yes.
Okay.
The textbooks would go into 640 if it was an actual textbook that
But
was.
is there an offset from, for Birdsboro? Like, wouldn't Birdsboro, essentially shows a negative?
Well, I think that the only thing we're missing a page that says BEC that has like an actual for 16, 17 and an actual for 17, 18 and a whole bunch of zeros. So that's all you're saying there.
Yeah,
That
like
piece
there's
of
still gonna be some
information is
expenses in
missing.
BEC, like you're gonna have, utilities and some facilities costs, which I think, maybe the whole thing just shifts over into the facilities line item, which is fine.
Some of it does.
I'm just saying that like the school or student related costs should show negative, right, from budget, because unless we had already built them in as zero in the previous budget, which we may have. I'm just, does that make, you know what I'm saying? Like, we may have had, we knew, the plan was to close BC, so maybe the next year's budget was already zeroed out for BC, in which case we're fine. I just feel like, without seeing it, I feel like I know I'm being a little nitpicky here. Without seeing the offset, I feel like we're just adding and not, there's no subtract.
And does the offset, what was spent at BEC, is more being spent at both other schools than what was normally at BEC? And then that is why.
Shaking your head. Just letting the record show that Mr. Wolf has joined us at 6:20 he came in.
It's generous.
what is the answer on that one? Because I thought the same thing. I thought, I see Amity went up 36,000, Monocacy went up 9,000, and middle school went up 19,000, and the high school went down. Is there some economies there available to us that we haven't looked at? That's all I'm saying. I mean, we went down $500,000 and all the other things, and most of it came from AEC, or from shutting of BEC. I'm just wondering, is there any economies in there that we're not looking for anywhere else in the budget? Maybe the answer is no. That's just a question more so than anything else.
Well, there's different times when things are purchased. It's like a wave.
Okay.
Ooh, I haven't used this in a while.
So it's consumable, so sometimes, if we look 2 years ago, AEC rated this building for supplies. So for about 2 years, they didn't really buy supplies. And now with the grade makeup changing, so first, second is now out of AEC. About 120 fifth graders are moving into AEC, so they need different supplies. You don't need supplies for first and second grade, so they're stocking up. Also, I know about 100,000 was pulled out of AEC's budget for certain projects that we're not going to do. This is basically just supplies and different programs that are being run.
There's just, again, it's just you look for the differences where the big hops are from actual versus budget. And that's what I'm looking at. The actual last year, and those were off. There's a big increase in supplies, but even professional. Is there a reason why Monocacy? And again, I'm not saying it's wrong. I don't understand it. So my questions aren't trying to say it's wrong. I'm trying to understand it better. On the professional services, professional ed services, and others for MEC, it's up 19,000. Is there a reason for the forecast to be another 20,000? Is there something occurring? How does that happen?
Rob?
Those accounts right there are, Kathleen controls those top two accounts that you'll see there, so she might be able to shed more color, but what I can do is generally speak, I think Kathleen, they are, those accounts, they tend to follow students around where particular high need students are. Is that correct, Kathleen?
Yes, up there, as well as the sub-service that we have. They're not only services through BCIU that we use for certain, different students on the regular ed, special ed is in a different area, of course. But they're also, that's where the sub-service is also budgeted.
One last one. We had talked in the last couple meetings about the masonry, what we were going to do for the building. We're getting ready to approve a budget, and I haven't heard anything back. What are we doing with it? Are we going to relook at it? We suggest, I think everybody agrees we need to relook at what we're doing there, or is that already being?
Mr. Thompson is due at the Cal next week with the breakout as the board requested when he had his contractors here. And he hasn't submitted anything since the meeting.
Does that have to be in this year's budget? Because we're going to run out of time. I suggest that if we paid for some type of a budget, there should be more detail than caulk the joints. There should be, how many feet, how much per foot. There should be some detail there, so we can go to another contractor and have them come look at the building and suggest things like how much would it cost to seal this building up and let the water out, and then take a 2-year look at it and say, did that reduce it enough to make the building sound versus a $2.9 million increase, or sitting and bending every little step of the way through another presentation. We should be able to have something we can get a competitive bid on our own, and maybe have a conversation with them and sit down. I would be happy to have that conversation.
Well, first of all, we'd have to go out to bid on that project anyway.
Okay.
So that means for the scope of work that we're requiring, that would definitely require us to go out to bid.
Gotcha. Okay.
But it doesn't mean we can't take. And we pay for the architect to come in and give us the engineering breakout there. So we could take that and ask for a second opinion because we had the work done, right? So that's always a possibility. Now, as far as money goes, right? So in our budget, we budget $500,000 for capital needs, and that's I'm sure that money's already been spent for next year, but that doesn't mean projects can't be reallocated, right? Now, Mr. Durso had requested to look at possibly taking out bond issue to have, maybe pay for some of those costs, right? So that information was sent out to everybody as far as the costs for doing a bond issue is concerned. My thoughts on that, if the board decided to do a bond issue, I would be uncomfortable adding that to debt service without taking that away from capital. So if we're going to add $300,000 in debt service, then we should take out $300,000 in the capital. So, but now we'd only be putting in $200,000 a year in capital.
I think
Yeah,
that.
so does that work? I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with all the above. My biggest thing is that I think we need to take a look at the scope of work and decide, because I asked them specifically, is there anything they could do potentially to provide us, instead of taking $1 million number and dividing it by 5 and it still being $1 million, to come up with an alternative plan that may be taking baby steps instead of a complete restoration of the building, which might not be necessary. It needs to be sound, it needs to be look good and all the above, and I think it's, we don't want to be an eyesore in the neighborhood, but I think there's a whole lot we could do to that building, reduce that bill greatly, lower the expense as a whole, and a bond would not have, maybe the bond's a tenth of what we were originally trying to do. I think there's a fiduciary responsibility on our part that way, is what I'm talking about. And can we meet with somebody to discuss that versus just taking it out to a bid? We have our engineer, maybe he's the one to talk to. I just, in my mind, I can't believe that there's not a more cost-savvy approach to this and take it in steps to see if it could be done differently. That's why I don't know which way to go with that. Who do I talk to? Is there somebody I can talk to? I do have that background, so I'd be happy to be helpful. And if the decision's just to go with a full restoration, then that's the decision. If that's, but I'm not sure. Is there steps towards that, or?
I think we should at least look at our options before we decide to do that. The other question, if we got the bond and the debt service, does that have to be in next year's budget then, or if we do it middle of the year, or?
No, you don't mean we don't have to say we're doing the bond now. I mean, we could do the bond issue whenever.
Right, and then the debt service starts the following year? Or?
Well, the debt service would, so depending on when it takes a while to get the issue out there, and so it all depends on when the first payments are due on the bond.
And there was other parts of the building on top of that. That was just for the restoration of the building, masonry-wise. I think they had.
Yeah, I mean, when Mr. Thompson is going to tell us that, if we're going to be putting that building back into service, most likely there's going to be a lot of HVAC work that needs to get done at some point over there, right? So there's definitely more than just masonry work that needs to get done. Yeah. So.
Part of my question too with the bond issuance was, even if you take BEC out, it's going to be nothing. We don't want our current buildings to get into the same predicament that BEC got into, where we did nothing and we just kind of went after things with band-aids. So even if we don't do anything with BEC, is it still smart to maybe, even if it's not in this year's budget, start to get more aggressive with maintaining our buildings instead of keep doing patchwork? Because we're going to run into the same problem. We know we got some stuff at the middle school, obviously the high school, our buildings are getting older. Even if that money doesn't go to BEC, we should make sure we're taking care of our facilities, because the problem is everything's going to turn into BEC if we don't start addressing it.
Part of that $500,000 was what Mr. Blankenville and Mr. Small and Haynes, I suppose, came up with a list of here's the top projects that we have to get for every school. The last 2 years, we spent a lot of money to replace the high school roof totally. So that's checked off. That was like one of the bigger items on the checklist. But they felt comfortable that the last time we spoke about a year ago, that the $500,000 we were putting would be able to keep up with all the capital projects that we had putting aside. What we just discovered with Birdsboro, that's a whole new wrinkle to the whole thing. And then plus refurbishing Birdsboro as well for the HVAC and otherwise. That was not factored into that budget, because those were things that had come out. So, but that $500,000, unless somebody tells me different, that was what we were told was adequate for our building needs for the other buildings going forward.
Yeah, that was based on a 5-year plan moving forward. And the key thing was the roofing, blacktopping, and some mechanical each year. And of course, we had set aside that chunk for the refurbishing and replacement of the turf. But if you wanted to do a major overhaul of anything, it would require more than 500,000 that you're speaking.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Anyone?
I have a question on the itemized stuff. That was just,
Yes.
there are no numbers. But on the transportation, the second page? On the second page of the transportation, the top line item is for non-public contracted carrier for BEC. All the other BEC ones are zeroed out. Is that what I have to say?
No. No, that's just, there are so many accounts
No, that's fine.
and this one.
Okay.
But no, I'll definitely get that fixed
So that will
before the
go?
actual budget. I've been going through everything with a fine tooth comb, trying to get it all out of there.
Okay.
But no, that would not stay.
Skyward will take care of that.
Skyward would have taken care of it already.
Right.
I just have an observation for some of the numbers. I noticed that all the, well, most of the expenses have built-in increases percentage-wise, either 2%, 5%, or whatever, which is natural with cost of inflation. But we don't have anything for our revenue for taxes are flat. We're raising them next year and we project it to be flat. So that impacts the numbers. Because I guess basically what we're saying is that if we don't increase taxes, if we're going to cut things or find other ways to be efficient. Ideally, it would be nice to get some commercial real estate or something else to do. We're either going to raise our revenue or we're going to cut programs.
With the fuel for transportation, just a question, do we contract the increase, or is that just, we just get handed a number?
Fuel goes out to bid annually with the IU. The county pulls out for bid.
Okay, so that's not part of the climb.
Well, we pay for fuel
Yeah.
because we fill up the tanks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, I
Yeah,
thought so.
but we bid it out. The school bids, it goes in with the IU and the rest of, most of the rest of the county to bid that.
Okay.
Is everybody aware of where we're at with healthcare for the year, by the way? I don't know if everybody got that. Is that a 9.5%?
9.5.
Yeah. So a little more than we were hoping for. So I think the business office had 10.5 budgeted, so
We were close. We were closer to, well, they originally said 12, then we backed it back to 10.5, and then they were continuing to say it was going down. I think we were just a little over 10, actually, so
Something
we were
like
very
that.
close.
We were very close.
yeah, well, unfortunately.
Against 1.5 last year.
So, yeah, so that was a piece of bad news. But, are you taking the meeting back over, Mr. Wolf?
You're doing a great job. I have every confidence. I don't want to have anyone go back and rehash what was discussed, but where did you start? Were you going through?
Mrs. Haynes went through just basically the sheet that she,
The changes?
I just went through the changes, and then we were kind of going budget by budget, just saying.
Okay, so that what I sent, as far as changes and Mr. Verso's question about the bond issue.
That's
There
in
was one
the
other-
5-year.
What was the other thing we didn't get anything from Thompson, but we
Correct.
will for the committee of the whole. But I think regardless, it's not going to be zero. I think we should consider, to respect of it, if we're going to take a bond issue and increase our debt service, or if we take a bond issue and decrease our existing facilities, capital projects contribution, I think we should be looking ahead for putting some money aside for Birdsboro. Because it's not an expense, it's going to get cheaper. So it just gives us another year to put something, anything away for that project.
One of the 5-year projections that she has to put on the screen incorporates the $5 million of debt that Mr. Durso had mentioned. I have one without and one with, so you can look at that and see how it falls out over the 5 years.
and you did the wraparound debt, is that what you put in there?
I put it in level.
Level?
We can change the numbers to wrap around. Wraparound, well, level runs it out for an extra 6 years or whatever. Wraparound, add 1 full year of that, tail end out at 30 or 20, 32 or whatever. Yeah, your wraparound adds through 2034, your level funding runs the smaller amount on 2038.
So the levels annually is smaller, however, over the life will be higher interest, right? Yes.
So does that start at next year then? Full debt service starts next year?
Yes,
Okay. So if we took another look at trying to do some incremental improvements and delay it, then that's not an option that we have to look at right now.
if you were to move forward with that, you would, the debt service would begin on June 30th of 19, but your funds would be available by this fall.
Okay.
Did the administrators from the schools come back with any cost savings at all since the last time we looked at a budget?
There wasn't anything specific from the schools. We focused more on facilities.
I know you guys did a good job, but the administrators that run those schools, it's hard for me to say what they do and don't need as far as supplies because I'm not there every day. But I would think that they would know, and if they could come back with potentially some cost savings. I'm not asking you guys to do it.
They did.
I'm asking them to respond to maybe you asking them to do that.
They worked with Rob and Michelle, and we cut.
They worked with Rob and he cut their fluff. That's why AEC was down over 100,000.
That was that
And-
original.
Right, and we have a new principal coming in with a different agenda.
You're saying it cut by 500,000?
No, that's basically Birdsboro.
That's just Birdsboro.
No, but the earlier budgets had reductions and new principals and new staff coming in with different agendas than what some current administrators have at AEC. So Rob,
As far as, while we're on the topic of budget for next year, real brief with the discussion of, I know that there's been some, I don't know the full story because didn't get it from administration. I don't have kids at the middle school, but I know we've had some issues over there. Should we have a security guard that's also in the middle school?
we've never discussed that.
I know we haven't, that's why I'm bringing it up.
Okay, we have a Safe Schools grant. Last year we used to purchase walkie-talkies, radios. It's roughly $25,000. A security officer, I believe, is $30,000. So we could put that for the Safe Schools grant and pay for it through a grant, going through the same service that we use for the high school.
Is there additional funds potentially coming from Harrisburg? That's what I'm hearing from the budget, that there's money for security for the schools. I haven't heard.
I met with Senator Rafferty last Friday down at Science College with some superintendents from Montgomery County. He's saying there is, but $100 million divided by 500 school districts, we get enough for about a dozen donuts. So,
Oh, that would get the police there, so we're good. Sorry.
On that, the numbers that we do spend for security, is that a service and we should probably maybe look to get bids on and see if the bids come in, because we are spending an amount that would warrant it to be bid.
I don't know. They were here when I got here, so I don't know how we originally did that. I know there were originally 3. We went down to 2, initially brought up.
No, yeah, Mr. Dresser is actually the company has provides it. Should we?
Now, at the middle school and at Amity and Monocacy, we work really well with the Amity PD. So having a security guard there may not be necessary. Yeah, we could talk to the principal and see what she needs. And we're also adding an assistant principal there.
Well, we have an assistant principal there.
We're adding a new, refreshed assistant principal there. So in the proximity to the police department and.
Well, maybe maybe it's only we need a part-timer, but
It's out of there.
Police department's right down the street.
I mean, they're right across the street, and unlike in Birdsboro, where the state police and the Birdsboro police, the state police have their own jurisdiction, our police officers are in the building, communicating. They're over here, they're over there. They're about 30 seconds away.
With the Safe Schools grant, is that also, is there a separate part of that grant that was, you were factoring in for the high school entrance configuration, reconfiguration?
We were looking at that, yes, or to offset some of the other costs.
So it's only 25,000?
25,000.
So it's not 25,000 per project, it's,
And it's one project per district, so we can either buy equipment or school resource officers.
okay. Because that was something that that was discussed in facilities, and, based on what's going on, to have the high school have a more secure access point. I mean, I think, in my opinion, it's a cost I think we have to absorb to
Right,
make that entrance more difficult to breach.
Right. When I spoke with Casey, we met out there and he said there's I guess behind at the entrance to the right, he said there's a doorway or something that's been bricked over to open that up. So the entrance now would be through Aaron Spores' office and changing the configuration of the office. So it would be a lot like the middle school and Amity and Monocacy. And you wouldn't be able to walk right into the building. You would walk in through the vestibule, make a right turn, and the office is there, and then they would allow you into the building.
We in 5-year budget?
Does anybody else have any other questions on this? Because nothing else changed with the Bitwell, with the exception of my $100 on the debt. But does anybody have any more questions on this? If you're going through it and you see any questions, don't even hesitate to email me. I'll get whatever answers you all want.
How will this be different looking next year when we do our, after you get your new fancy?
Oh my God, you guys,
Program.
you would be thinking about it and you would have it in your email. But no, the reports will be already.
You have to do anything next year?
And we would also see,
System got it all right.
That's going to be unbelievable.
Are you working your way out of a job, Pat?
No. We remember we had 2 business people in the office and now we'll have 1. So I'm making my job more efficient.
and also one of the bigger changes would be the items were recategorized, am I saying it right? So next year we will be able to really compare it to actual.
I've been working really hard. So when we get the new software, what I've been trying to do is make sure that everything's accurate in the right category. So when we dump and they merge this from CSIU to Skyward, the account codes, you're going to be able to see things just so much easier. That in itself was an efficient thing. Now, as far as Skyward coming in and being able to run the reports, and I know there's discussion there, but
Next year, can we do it this maybe from a zero basis, start from scratch? Because instead of going back and try to forecast, it generally helps you reset a budget that's over years starts to flood areas. And it's hard to see, and it's equally hard to see because of the account changes and whatnot. But is that something that we can do as a board, talk about now, and say next year, let's start at zero and have everybody build up? And we might find hundreds of thousands, and you might not. I don't.
you never know. But
You don't
just
know,
on the
you don't know until you start doing
changes.
from
Well,
zero
it's
up.
going to flip the dynamic of the budgets being put to us, and then us spending the next couple of months trying to figure out where the
Where
numbers
the
came
money
from,
is.
instead of coming up with the baseline of what the building costs, and then
Right.
here's all the things we want. Okay, yeah, it makes sense. Yeah,
Not
you're going to get,
not
you're going
things
to
that
get it
we
all.
paid this year, so we have the same money next year. Because if we have leftovers, we need to take that out the following budget. We're not going to put leftovers on top of leftovers. Because then that's
And
that's a
this
government
year,
spend,
the
that-
budget process will start much earlier because, with the new board being
Right.
seated, really a lot of work wasn't really done until after they were all seated, and in January, then the first thing out the gate is you have to make a decision on what you're going to do with the tax.
One last question. It's just an observation, and I might be missing something, so I'm going to apologize up front. This comes. A couple weeks ago, we had a budget meeting. We were going to cut, and at that meeting, we talked about a lot of different things, and we left with not really a lot of cuts in place that were spoken about. I think we actually spent a few dollars. Then the following time we met, we were going to cut some more. There were going to be some people here, and we put Lauren on, and I understand why we did that. We're going to do some projects. We're going to go after some cost savings items. But the net result of that meeting was we spent some more money. And then we were gonna go back and now, one last time and come back, and we did. We cut some out of facilities, but when I look at this, the largest piece of this is the BEC piece, which was planned. But we never really, where did the money come from inside, to your question, Aaron, where's the money inside the budget? Where was those savings, in there? Now, whether it comes back from the teachers or the administrators in each building, where's that money at? I mean, is there 3% added or 2% added to where we could dig a little harder and find some money in it?
The BEC piece wasn't in the handout today, right? There is a reduction
Correct.
in BMC.
It's right here, it's 461,000.
Yeah,
No,
that
that's
was
just a
given.
note. No, the
Yeah, but we
details
don't
of
have any
BMC
numbers
is
for
not
that.
in here.
Okay.
So you would have line items that saying it's going from X to 0.
Okay.
Because BEC is closed.
But is
It's
that,
not
most
in
of
the-
that 460 is from BEC going away, is that correct? So, again, I just go back to the pure side of the budget, savings, where are the savings at in the overall budget, excluding BEC, that's a given.
Well, yeah, I guess it's utility, this is an addition. We looked at the budget last time and said, why isn't it going down more? And it did. So this is an additional decrease from last time for
But
utilities.
it's all BEC, right?
Right, because that's, we raised the question about BEC, why was
It's
it so high?
BEC, but it's
My
basically,
question is.
we don't have to clean it, and the utilities are gonna cost certain amount.
Right, but that's not reducing like
It's not reducing the
paper
budget.
Right.
and color ink and all the stuff
And again,
that,
I
all the
just-
little stuff that.
Just asking for the sake of asking,
Well, last year that was in the budget and now it's 0.
Well,
So the only way we're saving money is by closing buildings. That's not.
we had some transportation alignments, but not really increasing the
From-
firewall. That's a kickoff
From
next
the
year.
aspect of
We got 4 left.
the budget, as far as, I'm going to just give you a view as to what it's going to look like in the future. The new program, Skyward, because I've worked it so many times, what happens is you give the access to, all the way to the teachers, however the team leaders, the department heads, however they do it. They're putting their budget in and they're justifying their dollars. They're putting in exactly their needs. That then goes forward to the principal. So it almost gets you to that zero-based budgeting where they're proving their numbers. You're at a point right now that you need to be reset. There's been so many changes and so many accounting changes, some of the buildings being changed, there's different, the iPads coming in, even that, from what perspective, when I saw the budgets coming in, that's the typical budgeting, is to put a percentage in the increase and make sure that, you stay where we are. But with the new program, I think you're gonna see some changes. Maybe not in this right here, where we did cut out a great bunch, but you might see some more cuts next year.
Because next
At
year,
this point, I don't think you can make any more cuts, because I don't know where to cut.
because for the last few years, we've been in change mode, I guess you would say. So next year would be when everything that we had planned over the last
It's
few
done.
years is done.
And now, starting from a zero base makes more sense, and I've pushed for that, because I think that's a good recommendation, is to start at a zero base. And using that program, the way the budgeting model works in Skyward, they don't have a choice but to use a zero base, because there's a description field. They have to go in and tell me what you're spending and what the dollar amount, do the research.
Principals then will take a look at each one of those areas.
Yes,
and say,
and approve it before it comes to me, so you can do it.
But there needs to be, the building heads need to have a session like this with their staff. Like what's happening is, all these things are getting entered in, and then the whole thing is thrown to this group, and then that's where the questions begin, which is the wrong way. The questions should begin at the building level.
Well, this was the first year that we actually had training. I asked the business office to train the principals on what it costs to run their building. So things were reallocated back to their buildings because
they can see.
Preston, Meg, and Jenny had no idea really what their building cost. All they cared about was supplies.
Well,
And so
that's good. I mean, we're talking about future state, right? We have this new tool. It's going to allow them to enter it, and then the building head's going to look at it first.
And then,
Like before it gets pushed on, they need to sit down and say, here, justify your budget to me. And then that same discussion happens at Jim's table with all the building heads, department heads saying, here's my budget. And then by the time we get it, it's been reviewed and hammered over and essentially blessed by 2 layers of management before we even see it.
Right.
And then that way, everybody can answer questions and we don't waste 2 months asking why supplies are double in one building. And I think,
Plus,
again,
how many times have you sat here and heard someone, administrator, say, well, yeah, I have some money over here that I didn't use, I can use it for this purpose. Well, what do you mean, what was that money that you had that wasn't used, now you just repurposed it instead of, all right, if you ran out of a budget, you're done, and then you have to come for approval to have something transferred. You really never knew what line items were being overrun and being supplemented by something that wasn't used, so.
I mean, we actually taught them budgeting this year. I mean, we sat down with them and instructed budgeting, because you saw what George did. George goes, I'll just throw it out there and get it paid for.
Right.
We stopped that, and that's why we caught a lot of things.
Right, but I think that we especially, I mean, you know, with Dane, everyone kind of just had a flippant attitude. Well, that's the way he budgets. Well, that's not the way you should budget. Somebody should have stopped them. You don't need $1,500 worth of snacks. You don't. It should have been stopped.
I do.
And again, that's where the question comes from. It's not an attack by any means. It's just how do we get back to this point where we go back to the administrators and say, you need to find $100,000. Make them stretch a little bit. All of us are sweating in this room. I know I am. I'm new. I'm sweating over it going, wow, what are we doing? And thank goodness we had the BEC money to make it try to get back out a little bit for a short period of time. But what about next year? And what about the following year? And so you start looking down the road, that they need to be, the heat needs to transfer.
Well, the principal, for one example, didn't understand the cost of subs.
Right.
So now they know the cost of subs, and that's been reduced. So they have to understand every action they take has a budget reaction.
Right.
So they're being educated on that. So you'll see there's a reduction in subs because there has to be a change in how they manage and operate their buildings. Because there is a cost to it. When you allow everyone to have off for whatever willy-nilly reason, we have a set budget. We can't go over that. So now the process for them to cover classes is changed. That's how we have a reduction in the subcost. And some principals are not happy about that, but tough, because that's what we have to work with. So.
And I can attest to that because I wasn't happy either. 3 years ago, we lost our subs to do all of our testing, and we had to make it work because they said, you're not getting it. It was the end of the story. It wasn't my principal couldn't go and beg, barter, steal, and say, hey, I'm taking the sub. They were done. They were gone.
So that's one area where we reduced outside of Birdsboro.
And we had a new plan in place next year. It was a paper debacle this year. I'm not sure what was going on with the paper, but we're actually going to police the paper and do an inventory sheet because I want to know which building is taking the paper and hoarding it because there's paper, the pallets that are missing.
Does our new ID system record who's...
It will be. It's going to be up and running, I believe, next year. Scott was indicating that. That's why we have the thicker badge. This is supposed to be copier. So,
And you hate to police to that level, but at one point or another,
but you have
big,
to.
small things.
Because
start
I
to
had
add up
buildings
and
calling
multiply
that there was
times
no paper whatsoever, but I know there were pallets of paper down there.
100. Right.
Someone said they took a pallet of paper and said that it was only 8 boxes. I think there's 60-some boxes on a pallet, so if you're taking that much. And the color paper, we had an enormous supply of color paper. Why can't the elementary just use all the color paper to send their flyers home? It's cute. I know at the high school level they don't want it, but we're doing things and we're putting things in place and policing things a little bit better.
And some of this comes from the fact that the high school didn't come up with a larger increase as some of the other schools. And I understand that they're not seeing the increase in the students in some of the areas, but still in every area. So that's why my questions were there. So.
And also, this is the first whole year with Peach Jar, right? When you started Peach Jar... No, well, Peach Jar is our way, so we're not printing everything. So getting the community and our staff used to not printing hundreds of thousands of flyers. So.
Thank you.
Can I go back to his original question, or maybe I missed it, but you said that you found some of the fluff. Where is that? Like Rob, you apparently, that's what they're saying. But I mean, did we go back to the principals? Did we really find fluff there? I mean, I don't see any difference.
That was before.
That was before the
That was
first.
already adjusted, yes.
It was already adjusted first before, like we've already had a meeting and it was adjusted prior to the last meeting. From the school level where they took out, we took.
If you recall the original budget we got from the
Okay,
schools
I'm
went back,
following you. Okay.
and AEC was like,
All right, so they changed it. Okay, okay.
So the first level was going back to the schools and having them do what they can do, and then we went back from the operations standpoint and fine-tuned that a little bit better. From the school, like AEC, I think was the largest. High school, there wasn't much in the high school. I think we had to add a little bit to the middle school because she didn't budget enough for the books after they got all the pricing for those readers that they're buying. And MEC needed a little bit of funds, but most of it came out of AEC. There was a major funding, it had been close to 100,000. Okay. So this one right here is the 5 million debt that he was discussing.
That's the fund balance.
Well, can we start back up? I mean, so I think if you look at the revenue side now, as far as property tax and earned income, and I think that's been polished up a bit. Right, that's a bit higher now. We've taken into account.
I tweaked the projection for both the assessed value each year and the earned income based on historical data and the last 3 years. The other piece that's added there, if you notice down under local real estate, I've added Birdsboro Power out in the third, fourth year out. I put the 14.5 million in. I put it in separately so that it doesn't get impacted by the incremental increase. So that's in there now in those outlying years. And that's pretty much the adjustments that I made on revenue. On the expense side, if you see the notes up at the top, there was discussion regarding the bubble on enrollment, passing through the middle school, and I reduced, keep going down to the expenses, Kathleen, please.
Did you adjust the earned income at all?
Yes, I just, the assessment and the earned income have I tweaked the incremental increase on both of those.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure you mentioned the earned income.
Then, down under salaries, I put a line in where we can make adjustments, and what I did was reduced salaries by 100,000 in the middle school on the 3 far out years. So that enables you to go in and you can make any kind of adjustments you want there, and it'll reduce then you end up with an adjusted salary line that FICA and PSERS and all goes against. And the debt service on this particular, this has got the $5 million level. Back to Mr. Rathkebb's question, level versus wraparound. The first couple years are pretty stable, not that much difference, but as you move out in the next years, it reduces your total debt service by utilizing the wraparound by about $200,000 a year. And with this particular model, I've increased the debt service but left the capital transfer still at the 500,000.
So that's borrowing $5 million for Birdsboro.
$5 million additional borrowing, right? And the numbers here are the level debt. Wraparound would reduce by about $200,000 a year.
We don't have enough money, so we're going to go out and borrow some. Is that the thought?
It's a
Well,
capital
so
improvement, too.
if you wanted to get your repairs done up front,
I got you.
right? There's no way we could get that money.
Right.
So you have to borrow. If you're willing to if there's a way to do some repairs out of that 500,000 or raise that a little bit and do it over several years, then that's or you do both, right? And you borrow some and increase your capital some, right?
So they made the prudent approach to figure out how much we do need to do to borrow some.
So that's the question. So, I mean, and we still don't know what, right? So what is, will Birdsboro need to reopen at some point? know. If not, what will the building be used for? So, I mean, I don't know.
Can you make enough repairs to, if you did, let's say you did the loan, could you generate enough revenue to cover the cost of the loan?
I'm sure Mr. Thompson,
What kind of tenant you gonna get? We already have River Rocks, and we're not, there was a trade-off, so you're not, I don't wanna say no and be negative, but you see the size of the debt payment, that'd be nice, but I think honestly, you're not.
It's in there, right?
Is that difference in
The
there?
annual debt payment is in there?
Yes, it is.
Yes. Your debt service line includes the debt payment for the additional $5 million.
Is it broken out anywhere, just so we can see what the total is for the year on that?
It was in the email.
It wasn't that one email, I want to
Yeah.
say, I thought it was around 320,000.
Just have us doing the maximum amount of debt of tax increase this year, borrowing $5 million. Is that what this budget looks like? Is that what we're looking at here?
This model is taxed to the index. I haven't adjusted, that's what's in your preliminary budget from January forward, the 31.1664. So that's all the way across. Yes.
So it's the largest tax increase, and
That's the-
Well, it's one, it's not, right, it's just one, there's no,
it's the largest that we can do
it's the
to.
largest we can do this year.
this year.
Right?
Right.
And then there's no other increases in
No,
it.
all the way across.
Well, there's no other increases in there, but
But
next year,
your fund balance is going away too.
Yeah.
And again, that 5 million was just thrown out there for us to take a look, to see where we're at. Just, I kept hearing, we don't have the money, we don't have the money. Well, you didn't have the money and we ran a building in the ground. So what are we gonna do next time we have a building? Are we gonna run that one in the ground? Or, we gotta do something with the building. You still have problems, and then you still, be great if we had a tenant.
but that particular building, the stuff that we're looking at, everything I saw was water damage for the most part. The crows have broke that whole nose block, and all the expansion joints are rotted out of it. I walked around it, and there's no upkeep done on the building.
Yeah, and I don't want to belabor it. I just asked for that to be in there so we could see whether you guys do that this year or
You have to do
allocate it
something, 'cause it's leaking like
some
a
other
sieve.
time. I'm
Right.
not saying you got to go in for the full 5 million. I just wanted
Put
to
a
see
number
the
out there
big
to think
picture.
about.
That's all I was looking for.
And just add a little bit more to that, I was the driver behind asking for that middle school number, right? Because if you look at our trends going through elementary right now, that reduction hits the middle school in a few years, right? So, if trends keep the way they are, right? So I think that 100,000 is probably a little light. Hopefully it's through retirements of higher, hopefully we won't let the cut any teachers, hopefully that this retirements will occur, this won't replace. So I would think that number might actually be, let's be, realistically, how many teachers would we be down at that point? It's like 3 or 4 years. And how many teachers are on the team? How many 3 teams right now?
Well, I sent out some data this morning that basically took the seniority level of all the teachers with their average salary and said how many we anticipate. So we anticipate losing maybe 3 to 5 per year. We do have 30% of our staff right at the 6 to 10 year level that bubble's going through. So they'll be progressing up. But our higher salary folks, 30 on each side. So we should be, through retirements, you're right, 3 to 4 or 5, and without looking at medical reasons, retiring each year, and depending on where they are. So you're right, we could come down 1 to 3 in a couple of years there. So depending on how enrollment goes, depending on how retirements go, and where they're retiring from. So Lauren has 1 person, we're looking at 2 possibly.
That's 2, that's just the salary portion.
Okay, so 2. So it all depends on how enrollment trends go. And also, in a couple of years, we will be re-looking at full-day kindergarten again. but that won't affect the middle school, but it may affect more kids coming here.
Well, I mean, that's not a possibility, right? So, yeah, you could, it's.
Because we're coming out off the pilot, it's a 4-year pilot that we're on year 3. So we'll be coming down a couple of teachers, just based on enrollment alone, and then through retirement, we just would replace, so through attrition. And we have, I think, 8 or 9 folks close to 30 years, at 30 or close to 30 years right now. So that's what the group I was looking at retiring, but they may not.
6.
66. Oh, done talking. That's it.
What do we use as a student-teacher ratio for middle school? Because it's not, we don't have a guideline for it.
All right. Middle school expert.
First, when you look at your general core classes, and first you have to understand at the middle school level, you're going to have different levels of classes, so much more than you're going to at other levels. But as a rule of thumb, you want to have an average class size, say, in a core class of around 25. But because of the way scheduling is done at the middle school with teaming and everything else, there's going to be a variance of about +3 or -3, depending on how the kids play out. So say, for example, if a kid's an honors math student in a regular ELA, that will affect. So you'll see some classes probably go up as high as 28-ish, and then you'll see some classes drop down to 22. But an average class size for a core subject, when you plan it out and model it, is around 25 kids. Like I said, you'll see some around 28, you'll see some are 29, that-ish, and you'll see some drop down to 22 in the standard schedule.
Oh. So how do we budget the number of teachers that we need?
When we go by team, right, how many kids per team?
Yeah, and it depends on the number of sections you run, and so that purely depends on that. And the other little trick you have to pay attention to at your middle level is certifications. Your 6th grade is a little bit easier because of the certifications they have. Your 7th and 8th grade, they have to be certified in content areas, so it gets a little more tricky because only, like, for example, a teacher's not capable of teaching by certification social studies and English, whereas in 6th grade they are. So when you generally look at that, that's how you model it out. Okay.
Well, okay, so then how can we look at the class sizes and say we do or don't need to reduce teachers?
Well, and it's all what you want to do with those teachers. Like, for example, if in your 6th grade, because you teach multiple things, you could, I mean, if in 2 years from now, if you take the enrollment you go down a couple grade levels, you can see the enrollment there. That's a pretty easy math problem.
If tomorrow 50 kids left each grade, how many teachers would you
I could model out anything. I have a spreadsheet right here that could model out a theoretical model of what we need from a staffing to maintain our current, average class sizes.
Can I ask a question? When it comes to staffing and student ratio, do we have any data from, I don't know, has the student to staff ratio gone up in the last how many years, and what our test scores look like over the same
one of the
years?
things we really, and which is going to be great once we get this data warehouse online here, is that type of data will be at our fingertips. Unfortunately, because we don't have a data warehouse up until this point, it's not at our fingertips. We can model some of that stuff out, we can pick out individual things, but it is rather time consuming because we have to pull back. If you go back to when the time of austerity hit, we were reducing significantly in the school district. Some of that even goes back to where there's paper records, not even Excel spreadsheets in terms of doing that. So we can probably answer specific questions for you, but it's not an instant as we'd like it to be. It will be though once this data warehouse had insights on.
Right, because my concern is, I mean, it's nice to cut, but what's that doing to the education?
Absolutely.
Well, again, the reason for my question isn't to cut or not to cut, it's just that,
No, I get your
like,
point.
over the last 5 years, what have we used as a baseline to say we have the right staffing? And then in the elementary, it's easy because we very clear guidelines as to where we want our range of kids to be. But what are we doing at the middle school and high school? Aside from the fact that most would say we need more teachers, what's the target? Like, what's the...
I think it's almost
No, it's a good question,
possible
I get it.
not possible, but it's almost, the range of classes, like even when you know, at our curriculum meetings, when we talk about the AP classes, some of them have 7 in it. It has to be that way. And to somebody on the outside, it would be like, well, that's ridiculous. Why would a teacher have a class with 7 kids? That's a very specialized class. It has to be taught. It's part of the program. So when you get into above elementary, it isn't clear cut because there's that ranging, like you've got, like you said, kid in honors English and regular academic math. And it's not going to be consistent. It's going to go up and down.
So that makes sense. So how do you, if the head count in the building is going to go lower in middle school in the next 3 or 4 years, how are we going to project how many teachers that we think we can reduce if we don't know any of that?
How can we forecast that?
Yeah, I mean, you don't, unless you know the mix of the kids and what they're going to be in middle school now, I don't know that you can accurately do that. So I would just say if we're going to project something, we need to be conservative because we don't really know how many we can reduce.
Sounds like we are being conservative.
Right.
Yeah.
I have one last question. Budgetary reserve, $200,000. Is that the right number, or should it be 100? It's a discretionary spending account, I can take it, or in case of a large purchase needs to come place, is sitting there for that. And when that happens, because it's put into the budget, is there any discussion from board level as to where the money gets spent? Because it's really not forecasted for any specific thing. For example, it's not forecasted for iPads, it's not forecasted for teachers, it's not forecasted for building improvement. It's just kind of sitting there. So I don't understand how that works. So it's more of a question, not a criticism yet.
That would be the uh-oh account, okay? Uh-oh is, we didn't fix a water main at the high school.
Okay.
It was left on. Uh-oh, we need to find funds to pay the bill.
Okay.
So that's what that's for.
It's an
And
insurance
ACs,
policy.
and it goes out.
If I got you.
Roof, something,
And then there's building expenses.
windows blow out,
I'm
something.
trying to understand it, but not
that- yeah.
criticize
But
it.
that's
Yeah.
something we added
A
to the
local
shirt.
law enforcement plows over a light pole.
Yeah, it's on the
Yeah.
debt
Nice.
account
Stuff you just don't
closing.
expect.
That's a good point, Jeff.
Does that actually happen?
Yeah.
Did it?
Well, Mr. Small, didn't like all of our budgets have a uh-oh account and then we consolidated that to one area? No?
Can I trademark
I seem to
uh-oh?
recall that. No. But that's what it used to be, right? It used to be everybody had their kind of reserve
Everybody had a-
account, and then we consolidated that to the one. So everybody had the rainy day fund.
This just keeps it in one spot, and
Yeah.
makes it transparent.
to watch it. Yep. Gotcha. Thank you.
I know we discussed it, but I don't know where that decision was made. Whether we do any type of increase our debt and we have additional debt service, or we set aside additional money out of the money we have for
Save money.
capital projects. We should be putting something in addition to that 500,000 in the budget, in my opinion. Whether it's going to be additional cost for a bond or additional money that we're setting aside in that account, there should be something there.
Well, I thought we just had a conversation that you were comfortable with the $500,000.
I'm not comfortable with 500,000.
Well, the one cost, and I haven't been in facility meetings lately, the field, the turf,
I think we should be putting aside in this budget, $800,000 to 500 for what we already had considered spending, and then have something, whether it be paying for a bond issue, or we just use that 300,000 just to Mr. Strobel's point, to stabilize the building, do the things that we need to do to get the masonry in Birdsboro stabilized anyway.
Well, that's the first thing to do anyway, right? It's just,
Yeah, we don't have any, right now, we don't have any idea what that 1.9 breakout is going to be. And they were using prevailing wages for that number, so.
Well,
that's
it's going
probably
to have to be
already
prevailing,
you
yeah.
know, 15% to that.
but is it fair to say that whatever, let's just say we go with Mr. Strobel's plan of seal the building, I would imagine that's not going to be the bulk of the cost of the 1.9 million. Is that fair?
What it sounded like. No, the bulk of the cost that they want to spend money on is ripping out layers of brick to put flashing in, when really, I think we can get away with putting some weak holes in. Water's going to find its easiest way out, it always does. Put a crack in your house and find its way in. So I think we need to stop the water from coming in and give it a way to go out. There's a couple areas I looked on there where they had put a roof in that was above the weep holes, and so maybe in those areas it needs to be attached. And then they wanted to repoint the entire building. I mean, I walked around it. I understand his point where you slick the joint and it puts a little thin coat on it, but I just, for the life of me, a 20 or 30-year-old building is going to have that type of wear. I don't see massive amounts of cracks to where I would want to repoint it. If anything, I would just want to try and seal it.
But I mean, we're also going to need to put in, those expansion joints are all
They're all
gone,
like that,
right?
And that's
And
not
we're going to need to put
expensive
new,
thing,
yeah.
talking about styrofoam and caulk, but so I just think we could take pieces of that, come up with a solution that's drastically less, and then take a look at it next year or the year after. Did we stop the water from coming in? Is it getting out okay? And then we can make those decisions in certain areas where maybe there is some areas where the flashing's bad. I don't believe that the entire building, the flashing's bad. I don't buy that. We never put dam dens on going across Reynolds. And so all those things we did 30 years ago, we're not replacing every building out there. You know, we're not tearing them all apart, and it worked. There's some specific things I think we could do, and I'd like to meet with them and talk about that. To your point, it may be, I don't have a point. That's why I want to get an estimate so we have an idea of what we're going to spend.
I won't be here next week. I won't be able to make the meeting. So I won't hear what they're coming back toward, with Mr. Thompson, if he's looking at a phased approach. But I don't want to have come to the voting meeting and say, no, that's not what I wanted, and have a chance of input. I think we should put something in this budget. I personally don't. I'm leaning towards not favoring pulling a loan for it, because then we're locked into debt and we're locked there. Where if we put it aside and we can always throttle back if something would happen, but I don't know. That's
So you're advocating taking that, was it roughly $300,000 additional bond service, roughly? So you're advocating
It's like 385.
taking that money and putting it more toward taking that and putting it into capital improvements all again. So we'd have like an $850,000
correct.
capital improvement budget.
100,000 more than this year.
But Lauren,
This year was the last year for 750.
okay, Lauren, did you say that it was in the future year budget? It wasn't, the 300,000 debt service was not in next year's budget?
It would be in a small portion. The way they structure this, your first year on level funding on $5 million for the 18-19 year would be $133,500. And then it moves up to $257 in the 19-20 year, and then it remains at $385,000 round numbers for the duration all the way up to 2038. So the first couple years, it's less, but then it levels off.
Now, I was just talking about next year, so really we'd be increasing it by almost $200,000. You're talking about increasing the budget.
Right, but Mr. Wolf's suggesting is they take instead of doing the bond, and so we wouldn't have that upfront money available. You'd have to work with what you had. It was $800,000 in a year. That's what you had.
Yeah,
So you couldn't go in and do a $1.9 million renovation.
No, I thought I heard you saying that we had the debt service in the budget that we could repurpose that. It's not $300,000 for the debt service that we have in the budget for next year.
Well, my thought was if you're going to take that $5 million, then I want to see a reduction in our capital to cover that.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
My point is that we're going to have to, if we want to put $800,000 into the fund, we're going to have to increase the budget by $150,000.
Yeah, that 500,000, we kind of came up with that number through working with when we did the study, the capital reserve study. That we had to come up with $10 million. I think, just throwing a number out, it was like $10 million that's going to be needed over the course of the next 10 years for capital improvements. So obviously we couldn't afford $1 million a year. So we picked 500,000. We were talking about it, facilities. Mr. Blankenmiller, Mr. Small prioritized. We're going to set a little bit of money aside for replacement of the turf at the high school because that's coming due. Then we have all these projects. We knocked off 2 real big ones, the 2 sections of the high school roof. Each of them were like $500,000. And we know that we have some other ones coming down the pipe, but that $500,000, everyone felt comfortable from the administration is that money would satisfy our immediate known needs. What I'm talking about is to keep Birdsboro was an unknown at that time. Happened with this masonry issue. What I'm talking about is money specifically set aside to address the issue at Birdsboro. So I'm not touching, I understand your point about reducing the $500,000 to $200,000 if we have $300,000, and I get that. But I always looked at that $500,000 to take care of the district needs. To Mr. Durso's point, we don't want to take the money away and then find in the 5 years that the other buildings have major issues because we weren't spending money on them as well. So I'm advocating that $300 in addition to the $800, and it would be earmarked specifically to address the emergency needs of Birdsboro.
But my question would be, is it worth it to take the bond issue, right? If and I don't know if Mr. Thompson, I'm sure he'd like to put the proposals forward of what we should do with the building as far as redesigning it, right? So my question is, what's the cost of repurposing the building, and what actual revenue will we get out of it? Because if we're going to repurpose the building, it's going to be a heck of a hard time doing it on $300,000 a year, because that's going to be just going to, and then so if we have HVAC and masonry work, and that's a couple $1 million, and then you want to repurpose the building a little bit, that's more money. So how many years would it take us to get the building in a shape where we can now actually get revenue from it?
Can't you make that decision when you get closer to a bid situation?
Oh yeah, you can.
Yeah.
You can. Yeah.
But it's a good point. I think it's a great point. My question is do we ever ask Mr. Thompson, he was coming in, to take this project that he had and divide by 5 or divide by 8? Because to be honest with you, that would insult my intelligence. I'd rather not sit through another meeting. We asked him to reduce it, and they said, well, we could divide it by 5 and do it, $500,000 a year. And that $500,000 times 4 is still $2 million. That's an insult. That insults my intelligence. That's not what I'm asking him to do. Do we know if he's coming with an alternative plan to not do all that work?
Did we get a preview or no?
Plan for us to pay for it. I'm busy.
And the point of the discussion that night was give us stages that this is absolutely necessary, and then incrementally. That my understanding is that's what he's coming back with, is what you just described.
The last time he was here, he talked about doing a section, and doing one section at a time.
No,
And that's just divided by 5.
What was necessary to secure the building initially. Yeah, because I pressed
what we
him.
paid for.
I pressed him to prioritize, and he said it's all priority.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what I heard too.
Yeah.
I just think we should probably ask that
Okay,
question.
but
And
to get,
there's some other things we already know. We asked a question last year about changing the pneumatic heating and air controls. It wasn't possible. Well, we found out it is possible. It is pretty easy too. Mr. Blankviller had a very easy, plausible way to do it. So we already know that you don't have to replace the whole building HVAC system at one time. You could take a section, start with classrooms, obviously, that were going to be used first, and do a couple of those. So it can be, you can do a systematic approach. It's not an all or nothing situation.
but I think it's pretty simple from what I'm hearing, right? So this one budget includes debt service. There's
Yes.
another budget that does not include debt service,
Yes,
but has our regular $500,000 capital, right?
yes.
So
Before we move away from this and go to the other one, I just wanted to point out once again, Kathleen, if you want to scroll back down to debt service, and that's the far column to the right, the 22-23 year, that is the year that your current debt service has the $800,000. spike and then it levels off at that level. So just keep that in mind. You already have it. So if you want to go to the,
But so I mean, it sounds to me like whether you're in favor of the bond issue or we got in favor of adding our capital, right? That number's roughly the same. So, but the one to Mr. Wolf's point, you can turn on if a future board says, you know what, I don't want that $350,000 going to
the debt
our
services there, you're not going
debt service. You can't turn it off. But either way, it sounds like to me next year's budget should include $350,000 roughly somewhere, right? So.
Flip up the other one there, Kathleen.
But and again, just so I understand, I wasn't here for it, the debt service we have now, the football got pushed to the year 2023.
So when the previous boards, we found bond savings by reissuing,
Okay,
those savings were allocated to the upfront years.
okay.
So those savings are going to be depleted coming in a couple of years.
Push the expense down the lane.
That's why you're refining. I mean,
No, I get you, I understand how it works.
Yeah, I tried to push for a more leveler, but the rest of the board wanted more upfront.
I get it.
I mean, it is what it is. And it certainly did save us money. We did save money. No questions. No questions.
I'm not criticizing it, just, you
Yeah.
know.
So there's without additional borrowing, your debt service, this next year is the $6,013,000, and then you get out to the far right column again, you see the 6.9. And that's with the 500,000 level for capital transfer.
Okay, I haven't had dinner yet, so I just want to make sure I'm getting comprehension here because I'm starting to shut down a little bit. $350,000 is in this budget specifically earmarked for either
No.
Birdsboro or the bond?
This budget is without bond, without extra money.
Without that bond?
The previous budget 5-year was with a bond. This has no bond, no extra money.
Okay, so you switched.
I just
Right.
switched.
We
Oh, you-
just- we
I
just-
just
Okay.
switched.
You pulled a fast one.
But from what I'm hearing from your side,
We said we were pulling it up.
from what I'm hearing from your side is you're in favor of more money, but not necessarily the bond issue. But either way you look at it, it's roughly within the same
It's a
ballpark.
decision the board has to make on which direction we're going to go. But I
Kathleen
think the
can
money
enter
should be
any
in the
number
budget
in that
for it.
capital transfer line you want, and you can see the impact.
I mean, I don't care how it's in there. I don't care if it's in there for, debt service or additional money for capital projects. Either way, I just wanted to make sure we have something set aside for Berkeley.
But again, just for clarification, the debt service for next year is $125,000 increase, not the $300,000.
But if you look at it, it's only,
$200,000.
right, it's only a year, right?
Oh, yeah, no.
So I mean, the money's going to,
Overall,
so,
you're right.
yes. Yeah.
Did I hear a proposal to make the 500,000 800,000?
Yeah, if we're not going to do the bond issue, then we should probably make that, 850 or whatever, 800, 850. Mr. Scott, you have a question?
I can't even fathom why we would take a bond out to do all those repairs to that building if we had no plans on using it. I think you take.
Didn't we do that with this one?
Exactly, and when I came on, that's all I heard about from people was how we shouldn't have spent all the money refurbishing this building. And I feel like here we are talking about doing the same thing essentially. And then it'll become more money when we decide that we want to do something with that building aside from having it be a school, when we could, one, seal it and find out that stopped the problem. And we can move on.
So, I mean, I kind of lean toward, right now, at least, towards Mr. Wolf's proposal of adding capital so that we can address, so we have some money to address
The needs of the right.
meets so that the building is not deteriorating anymore, right?
Right.
So we can lock it in, keep it in, and then figure out what the heck we're gonna do with this building.
But we won't know what that number is until we talk to Tom.
But at least we have some money set aside down in the budget, right, to,
And that building has a new roof under warranty. It's got 2 new boilers in it that we just bought, 3-4 years ago. If you get the outside stabilized, really, the ADA doors are still gonna be non-ADA. The other issues that you have inside are still gonna be there, but it'll be stabilized. It's not gonna deteriorate, from a maintenance standpoint, which is what I'm looking at. If it's gonna be mothballed, well, mothball it, but maintain it and stabilize it and get the essential things done to repair it. And I think this brick issue, this masonry issue is one of those things that's gotta be resolved.
Because let's say we go another 5, just for argument's sake, we go 5 more years of 200 kids, each year coming in, right? MEC and AEC, their overall head count will drop from where it is today, which means that gives us a buffer that if in fact head count starts to go up, we have some space in MEC and AEC to withstand a few years of larger classes, and that means a few years of being able to, our revenue will increase theoretically, because we'll have, if it's going up, then we'll probably see more people living here, or something's changing, right? And so that'll give us 3 or 4 years of where we can start to put money in it if we need to make it, a legitimate, viable school.
I guess the big assumption there is that we would have some leeway with Monocacy and AEC.
We will.
It continues to pretty.
Again, the assumption is, let's just, for argument's sake, say we level off, our headcount doesn't decline anymore, at least entry point. Right, so it's 200-ish kids every year, kindergarten, first, second. Then we end up with 600 kids in each of those schools instead of 750 in AEC and whatever it is, 600 in, it would be roughly the same right in the MEC. And then that gives us a few years of growth that we could, throw some money at, making that building, assuming that the blockage or the stoppage or the seal or whatever, that stops the decline of the building, and then we can start to chip away at it.
I do understand what you're saying, and I understand your concern that in the past, as you said, all you heard about for years about this building was we put all this money into it, and then we ended up closing it because we didn't need it anymore. But I don't want to go in the other direction where we take an asset that we own and let it deteriorate to a point where it isn't usable anymore. So that's why Mr. Wolf's suggestion that we find a way to make some of these repairs sooner rather than later that will stabilize the situation and keep it from getting any worse while it's lying fallow, dormant. I think that is a middle path that makes sense, because you are going to hear we're going to hear it from people if we let something that we don't currently owe any money on, that's an asset to us, become a non-asset.
I agree. I mean, if I lived in Birdsboro and I watched the demise of the school, and it would upset me. And I'm not saying we let it go. I'm just saying to dump. I don't even know. We don't have any bids. I don't even know. We have an expert, at least relative to us, that's saying that in his estimation. Well, I said relative to us, right? I know what a brick is. That's not where it ends. And so, he's saying that he feels that some of that work isn't necessary. I would want to know what is, and it sounds like the first thing we do is get the order to stop coming in, and if it gets in, let it get out. And then, again, that's when we start to chip away at fixing it, and then hey, if we get someone who wants to use the building, then we take a loan out, because the cost of the loan will be less because we'll have some revenue to offset some of that cost.
Do we reach out to a real estate agent or get ideas from that type of, is there something like, maybe there is something they could look at that building and say, if you do this, it could be used, I don't know, to your point.
We had some people that were interested in it. various groups.
Right. I don't know what happened to that.
I mean, are you saying as far as lease?
Well, I mean, if we're gonna make, obviously we're gonna make repairs to seal it, but, you know, if we were gonna make some changes, to your point, you know, maybe there is somebody we could bring in, or several people we could bring in, you know, the Birdsboro market and say, hey, I got a client over here, they would love to use this for X, and if we're gonna make the changes, maybe as we're making the changes, make it to, you know, again, I'm not trying to kill it as a school, but if we're gonna make the changes, and to your point, you know, we can make it to their liking, I guess, or, I don't know if that's the right word.
Well, ultimately, what decision are we making by June 30th?
I don't believe we will have. My opinion, I don't think we'll have
So I think
enough
that's
information
the
to.
key question
Yeah.
to answer tonight is
Yeah.
the differences.
Yeah.
for
So
the
I-
current budget is the difference
That's right.
between 500,000 and 800,000 capital.
Yeah, I think we're on the right path. We're putting some extra money in there to stabilize the building, to maintain it. Then going forward, we can look at options of, okay, what now can we use this building for? How much will it cost, right, to finish all the repairs? And also, hey, if the YMCA, if you know, a daycare center, if whatever wants to move into the building, what will we need to do, right? So.
And I just don't think that, I think that everyone who has ideas of where we want to go with that building, I think everybody has very good points. I just don't think we have enough information from
Correct. Yeah, correct.
anybody to make that decision tonight.
Agreed.
But we still have to put forward a budget. I think we can just put a hook in there to allow
Yeah,
us to.
yeah. I think we can all agree
I
with
think we all
that.
agree.
Yeah.
We all agree on
Yeah.
that.
I think we all agree.
So we're
Move
on?
on?
Okay. we can-
So, I guess so then, that's fine, we sort of agree on that, I think it's good. I guess the other thing is, what about the negative fund balance in the next 2 years? Are we gonna budget, are we gonna put, what are we looking at for tax increases?
Well, I voiced my opinion ever since I got on the board, right, was kind of try middle of the road. You know, I was never a fan of the zero tax increase, but neither am I a fan of the let's raise it to the act one index every year, right? And you know, looking at some historically, I know that Mr. Miller's concern was trying to maintain CPI. Well, if you look at Act 1, it's been higher than CPI. I mean, CPI roughly has been past 10 years averaging about 1.5%. Now it's been going up recently, but Act 1 certainly has been more than that. So, you know, to me, I always say is a half mil is 0.6. You know, can we get? What if we plugged in 0.6 mil going down? Every year. But we're still probably not going to like the numbers because remember these numbers don't include anything for labor, right?
No.
So
The other expenses are going up 2.5% to 5%. That's the problem.
yeah, I think there was one expense.
Our expenditures go up.
Was it purchased property or other property that was going up? What's Kathleen? What percentages was plugged in for either other property or property? One of them seemed to be a little high.
Other property is 2.5%. Supplies 2.5%. Purchase services 2%. Healthcare is 5%.
Well, in the 5 years it's more, isn't it? 5 years.
No, it was the same.
Up there.
Oh, sorry.
So 10. We're doing 10.5 for healthcare.
Yes,
That's 5% right there.
right here, there's healthcare, there's retirement. Is that retirement or that's retirement?
That's healthcare. That's 10. That's 10.5. Right?
Healthcare, yeah, healthcare is
No,
10.5.
Healthcare is the one that goes up by a significant.
Yeah, it's 10.5.
Than retirement.
Yeah, so
10.5,
10.5.
10.5.
What's the down one? Or not keep going.
Which one?
So that's 5. Yeah, 5%.
Yeah, 5% for other benefits.
Other benefits. Okay,
Purchase service 2%, 2.5.
You were just 2.5. Okay.
I think they're all about the
I thought I
same.
saw one was maybe I'm not thinking.
I don't remember
thought I saw
one
one that
being
was
that
high.
high.
That kind of caught my eye.
I had a question.
Maybe it was going out farther.
But I usually read this.
8 million there.
Do we have one-
Mr. J.
one
Scott.
meeting? One
Other
meeting?
purchase, other,
You asked a good question. You
going up by
didn't
2.5
answer.
million.
Do you have a suggestion? I know you threw it out there for us, and no one really answered it.
That's 500, that's gonna be.
Which
your
is a
tuition.
viable question. Do you have
It's going up from.
any suggestions or,
I mean, as far as the millage,
and fund balance?
yeah, I mean, historically, when we had a negative fund balance, we've generally been off to the good. You know, in other words, if it's negative next year, it may make it to the year after.
Oh, yeah.
Right, you know what I mean, like but it's coming, like it's not a mirage, it's real, so, you know, you don't have to necessarily, but I think the question is, you know, if you want to go an incremental route, you'd have to tinker with, you know, like Dave said, you know, you'll go $500,000 or $750,000 over the next 4 years. And that's before we've adjusted, he has a standard increase in expenses, it's pretty reasonable to it.
it varies.
All right.
Category, by the
So I mean,
You
call it
got
inflation.
the spreadsheet here, plug in what you want.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is, it's
Like
not
you said,
it's not a,
If we had Skyward, Mrs. Haynes, you
It's not
could
a-
think it, and it would automatically.
it's not a glass,
We've already
it's not a
been-
glass.
What was the name of the Terminator? What was the name of the?
think it was Skyward.
I just worry that,
I asked her about
What was
I
it?
worry that
Skynet.
if you raise to the highest level in year one, and you have this perception that you have extra money going into the next year, and you believe that it's not gonna be that bad the following year, and then you get there, then you're forced to do the same thing the following year.
Yeah.
And that's the part I don't like. I don't wanna get into that. Because in my mind, if you're really forced to raise taxes to the highest level you can every year for you know, several years, then one or two things have happened. And one is you just you haven't managed the money right, or your expenses are just not controllable. You know, and I know when we went to the PASMA training 2 years ago, that that was the big opening topic was budgets across Pennsylvania. And I know they said their estimation was that in whatever it was, 5 years or 10 years, that schools are gonna start filing bankruptcy. Like they're not gonna have a choice. Like they're not gonna go raise the taxes legally high enough. They're not gonna be able to cut, you know, you can't do 51 kids in teacher ratio, so there's only so much you can do. So to your question, I would try to figure out a way to raise the taxes incrementally. And then try to see if you can pick a number that keeps your fund balance maybe a little lower than you want to, but at least there's something in it.
So, a mill generates like $1 million.
Yeah.
So you can see you're not getting there. And I keep saying that eventually you're going to have to go to
Referendum.
a referendum.
Yeah.
It's not a question of if, it's when. It's how long we can forestall it.
With this spreadsheet, if you raise it to the index or close to the index, the next 5 years, you wouldn't have to.
Well, you're missing a really big piece in
I
there.
know.
Unless the teachers are going to stay, flat for the next 5 years.
Well, I mean, in its current state,
They won't be able to pay for the
We're-
tax increase.
We're not gonna talk about that right now.
no, I'm talking about this current budget, but in its current state, it's what it is.
Yeah.
So I guess if we want to
That's what
see
makes
that,
me nervous, is like,
I understand.
it's negative sooner than I would like to see.
3% now.
Yeah.
And we put the hooks in there for the things that we knew for the properties that are coming out of, LERDA or the overlay districts are going to be expiring. So that money is now reflected in there.
Yeah.
It could be, I don't see the Birdsboro Power acting any different than what Calpine did and what they did to Muhlenberg. They just went and appealed their tax rate.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't, like, in like 2 years out, when the balance is getting lean, isn't there a point in time during the middle of the year where we're negative, we're waiting for revenue to come in, we're waiting for
So, you mean,
If I recall, there's a,
so you can always do a tax anticipation one,
yeah,
right? I mean, the IU has had that for years. We've gotten it down, right? But the IU still has, I think, $1.5 million on a.
the month over month. Even the years where you had with like $2 million in fund balance, at some point during the year, you were actually negative.
No, I don't think it's that. We've never been negative, but you could.
It would theoretically.
Even 3 years, in theory, it would be, and that's what happened 3 years ago with the budget impact. Many districts went negative.
Yeah.
They went out for tax anticipation notes and beyond.
When the budget hadn't been passed.
Right.
Yeah.
Thinking that they were going to be reimbursed for the borrowing costs, it didn't happen.
In fact, I mean, I think there are some districts that are, chronically poor areas that live on.
Trans.
Yeah, they're negative, so they have to borrow to run future tax revenue. So maybe some of the flush districts that are sitting on 10-15% of their maybe we can borrow from them. Well, I mean, so where are we? We're voting on the final budget the third week of June. Yeah, 2 weeks from tonight. Yeah. So that's when our final vote needs to get cast.
Everything happens at that millage, the levy, everything.
Yep. So you have 2 weeks to make your choice.
What's the recommendation then?
Prepare your best argument.
Rather than on the night of the budget talk about the tax increase, where are we?
So I mean, right now you have the 5-year stereotype, right? So if you want Mrs. Haynes to put something in there, a millage you want to see in there.
I don't know. I'm just saying as a group. Where's the group? Where are we at?
Well, I think I told you my opinion.
Right, but I'm saying where's the group we at with the tax increase? I mean, we're going to go to max. What's the thought? I mean, because we should probably iron that out now, so we're not talking about it again later. We're all here
Going to the index or
to
some.
the index.
What
right?
is the CPI? Do we know what that would look like?
I'm sorry.
CPI as opposed to the full index. I think that Mr. Rathgeb is correct, that the index is higher than CPI.
Well, the CPI 17-18 was 2.1, where Act 1 has been over 3.
Yeah. So is that 0.7 mil? So, I mean, does anybody want to see Mrs. Haynes put something in for millage? So, I mean, everybody has a spreadsheet. I mean, you could put whatever you want in your own spreadsheet.
Just for everyone's, a lot of the new board members are here. The thing I always hated when we got to the last meeting in June, that everybody was holding their cards close to their vest, and this is what I want, this is what I'm going to vote for, and what I'm not. And what happened was, we would get there, and then they'd be trading. Well, we're going to trade, music, elementary music, and if you cut this program, I'll give you elementary music. And
Yeah, we haven't done that in a couple of years.
no, but we still got to the
But
very end.
what we've done recently was, okay, I'll float a resolution. I'll do a point and then see if you get the votes or not.
Right. So I'd rather avoid the theatrics and say, all right, we may have differences, but
Well, I mean,
if we have five,
if we're going to do if someone's going to make a motion to the index, I would vote no. Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, but there might be 5 votes for that, right? So.
You want to do a straw poll? See where we.
As long as I'm not first.
Well, I think, it's easy to say you're gonna vote no, hoping 5 vote yes. But, if you inherit the mess,
Can we go back to that?
I'm gonna say no, just because I'm not gonna let somebody who was on the board for a long time and didn't, I'm not saying you were part of boards that didn't do anything, so I'm not gonna let them take the easy way out. So I'm saying, no, I clarified.
I'm not
Sorry,
saying you,
Dan.
but you were on the.
Yeah, but you were.
No, but to Mr. Rathgab's credit,
Remember
he
who was voting
did
against?
speak up a few times and got shot down, so I'm sorry he came out as you.
I did vote no on a couple budgets.
Right.
But,
So I'm not gonna sit here and allow that to happen. So I'm gonna vote no.
What are you voting
What
no
are
on?
you voting for?
I don't know, whatever. No, for the max increase. Because
For the max increase.
I'm gonna play politics right now. So I'm no.
What can I trade you for that vote?
Because it's gonna be easy to sit down and, I'm not gonna let someone take an easy no vote when I believe previous boards put us in this position. So,
Just give him 10.
No, the easy vote is no.
exactly, that's why I'm saying that.
But I mean,
Unless
you're not
you've been
really gonna
voting-
vote no,
unless you've been voting
you're gonna vote
no.
yes for something, because we have to pass a budget.
There's only one person here voting
So the
against.
question-
Everyone got my point.
Yeah, I do, but I think, what my point is,
What are our choices?
we have to pass something.
Your choice is anything from
We're gonna
zero,
vote yes on something.
0 to, what is it, what
What's
is,
the index?
3.3.
what's the index, how many mils is the index?
31.166.
But how many mils is it, 0.96 or something, or point?
Less than 30.2 to 31.164 is 0.996.
So it's 0 to 0.996 of a mil is your, and anywhere in between.
What do you recommend, Dave?
Like I said, I mean, if I had my full druthers, I would take a 0.6.
Right.
And-
Go around the room, take a vote.
Well, you want to see it though, you want, I mean,
Well, I've already plugged 0.6 into my, you know.
you should plug the number into the spreadsheet at home and look at, like, if you're someone who likes the idea of an incremental increase, then.
Now plug in 0.6, you're still gonna be negative in you know,
0.96 is still negative.
yeah. But it just prolongs the pain.
So I'm saying, like, if no one does that, then on the 18th, we'll vote like 9 times.
No, we won't.
Okay.
But you know, but if I can get the budget out 4 to 5 years, give or take,
So he's voting no.
I think once you get past that, it starts to get pretty fuzzy past there,
I
right?
think there's a couple things that are in play too. I mean,
Well,
we're
that's
not
not
considering next year we're going to start at a zero cost
Right.
basis. That's going to dynamically change this budget. It could. And so I'm inclined to lean towards, well, I know there's going to be big increases for other things, but I'm inclined to go with Dave from that perspective and see what happens to the budget next year with the zero cost. And then we can make that decision and say, well, now we've got to take it up to that 0.999 or higher.
I got a question for Mr. Small and Ms. Haynes, whoever would be the best to answer. When you have a budget that looks like this, 3-4 years out, and then you go to pulling a bond, do they look at this? Okay, now, if I was to loan, why would I loan a school district who's
Well,
going to be underwater in 3 years?
Mike, I would have said the same thing, but our loan rating came back A+. You know, and I'm looking I'm thinking, how did they get an A+ from? But that's what we came back with, right?
Well, that's bad.
But
When's the
Because you
last
pay your
one?
bills. You pay your bills.
No, I just wondered, is this budget something we produce? And
But I
then-
mean, if you're looking at what's the difference between maybe A+ and A, how much of an interest rate switch is that? Maybe 10 basis points, 20 basis points. I'm not a bond expert in that municipal and how they are issuing, but it's not going to be like 1%, right? So.
Mr. Atkin, I kind of didn't hear you. What did you say, 0.6?
I'm in favor of a 0.6. That would be my preference.
Can we see what 0.6 looks like up there?
I think that's it.
That's up there now?
That's your bottom line right there. It's like
That's
3
.6 for all the years. I mean, like, and then flat.
It's a one.
Yeah, for all the.
Flat for all the rest.
I can
It's
flat
just-
it. Let me flat it for you.
That's just one time, right? Is that what you said?
Well, I was going 0.6 across the board, but obviously,
Each year?
yeah, but obviously, you could do more, you could do less, you could flatline it, yeah.
I have it all the way out to the right decimal place, but you'll get the picture.
Obviously, in .6 year over year, it's a lower percentage.
Magically disappeared.
No, this is because I need a new computer now.
Oh, now you want to do
If you had
computer?
new software, it wouldn't
They
have
have it on order, but this is what it keeps doing, sorry.
Just get Mr. Schmidt to get it for you.
He has somebody who could hook you up.
He's got a guy.
He's got a guy. You really didn't need to go to these lengths to,
Get a new computer.
That's why.
It happened at the bingo fund.
It just needs, and that's what I'm telling him, it needs to get this, I need it over now. They gotta
I
make.
got a nice new Sonic toothbrush from that bingo game.
I can look at the card.
You got it good?
Huh? Yeah,
And that's
he's
what it
gonna
would
bring
look
over.
like
This
with-
is
You've
what
got
it's gonna be
800 in the first column
You
that
should
we
have
can't
seen
see for the transfer.
But that's 0.6 every year.
No, that is not. That is 0.6 this year and flat the rest of the years.
Okay.
0.6 in each year.
No, it's .6 this year.
Slide over to this year's column, Kathleen.
Oh, sorry,
No, no,
my other one, I know.
it's just .6.
Yeah, you still got 500s going.
Increase in percentage.
No, she has 800.
But
I have
not.
800 and then
Oh,
5. Do you want an
Yeah.
8 across?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, it's either the bond issue or it's
Or
going
we're
to be.
increasing
So,
that.
yeah.
The other option is what we don't use in that budgetary reserve can also go to that bottom line and decrease that. Because who's to say we're gonna use the whole 200? So instead of saying 800 there, it's all the same.
No, I'll just do that. Like, yeah.
So that's saying that we're not going to get a bond.
Well, but that
Right,
doesn't
but that's
include increases
putting
for
in the-
future years. That's flat for future
Right.
years,
There's
which is
other-
not what
Yeah, there's
Mr.
half
Radke was
increase.
suggesting
Yeah, I don't
was
think-
what his
that's not
conventional
realistic.
wisdom would be.
And there's other line items in there that.
I'm not saying my wisdom is.
I said it was conventional.
Well, if you,
No, no,
so do, the max is what, 0.99?
This year, it changed.
For this year.
9.6.
All right, so let's call it-
And change.
So do half half of that. So do it 0.5 each year.
I mean, if history holds, I don't think the Act One's going to be, we've been
No.
pretty steady on that. And our Act One tends to be higher, right, because of our poverty rate, right, Lauren?
We got categories in there that we don't have real numbers in yet, so you're voting on something knowing that some line items are gonna be going up, I mean, realistically.
Over the 5 years.
Yes.
Again, CISA.
Can we do let's just do a half every year?
Take a look. 31.3.
If that
The
program
computer says
was-
no, we're not
So
doing that.
dramatic.
She and Scott were just wouldn't have.
That's right.
All right, you can get a new
Give her
laptop.
the program, like you don't need.
Someone
Just
is
get
coming
her a
from
new
the back
laptop,
door here.
please.
Hey, Rob, can
Mine's
you,
not in order.
can you bring your computer over? Shut down.
We need to get you.
I don't know what it is, I have no idea what it's doing, they've changed everything out in it, it's a lost cause.
31.8.
I would think so at first, then I.
So what, the
Scott
teachers are
thought-
taking how much of a salary reduction?
And
We
then
can plug it
just
in
leave
for
the
5 years?
last two at 31.8.
The reduction?
He's
No.
checking it now.
Hurry up and look before it goes down.
Yeah.
You wanted to match the index and go up, right?
You need 32.3 if you want it by half, Kathy.
Well, I told her just to leave it that way, because I mean, you
Yeah.
have
Oh,
to
you
stop,
leave it at
you have to
8?
stop
Okay.
increasing somewhere, right? You eventually get to 100. Eventually.
Do a reassessment.
And then, so in that sense.
I was just
we're
saying,
still- we're still
is there an
like
incremental,
the water on the fund
is there an
balance.
incremental increase that keeps your fund balance
That's true.
at a decent level?
That-
Mr. Miller, I would support you doing a lawsuit to get the state to reassess.
As a
That's what I was,
county, York reassessed their county.
Well, then I
It's never
would,
gonna-
I would support you doing a lawsuit to,
what's the incremental increase?
You're never gonna get Bergen County to read until all the commissioners are ready to be done.
until
Last year, they're all gonna be in.
until they get sued,
That's the increase.
forced to do it, is what it boils down to.
Or they all decide to go out last year. At the same time.
Change the tax structure.
So you don't have 200,000.
Well, that would actually be probably more detrimental to Birdsboro.
To get rid of that chair.
Because your property, age of your properties are so much higher than Amity for a lot of them.
Yeah, but, like, I know my house is assessed that, I'm sure if we ever assess it, fine.
That's what I'm saying, it would be more detrimental to Birdsboro
I think it's
residents.
gonna be that way for a while.
A lot of the Amity, especially the ones that moved in like early 2000s, mid 2000s.
Next year and year after, and the permit, double it.
I mean, I'm betting there's going to be some people in Amity that are going to hit that at 10,000 deductions.
There's already a number of them that are already there.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying, but they didn't go into effect until this year. So I know there's some people in Amity that are going to hit that.
Maybe go right about the chair.
I said, we can't get there by 5.
What are you saying over Amity? What? 10,000 tax,
So the tax law changed this year?
right?
They're capping if you itemize, they're capping your deductions for mortgage expense at $10,000. And so it's actually mortgage, combination of mortgage and your state and local taxes.
Yeah, my taxes are larger.
Yeah. So the combination of your mortgage deduction, your state and local tax deductions are capped at $10,000.
Mortgage and tax capped at 10.
Yeah. Pretty sure, right? Yeah.
Well, I've seen two
Okay,
different interpretations.
I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Did we come to an agreement that for this budget we're talking about? For 0.6 mils, is that what we're talking about?
That was just my
That's
suggestion.
the only number I've seen heard thrown out, so we've seen what the effect is, and then unless.
Mi- mi-
0.75.
Is that the
Do we hear 8?
CPI index or not? I'd rather see what that was. Is 0.6 CPI or is it, I think that's below CPI, isn't it?
CPI was 2.1.
Do the math. I didn't really do the math.
Yeah.
So what would the equivalent millage increase be to that CPI?
It's not with the index.
2.1% of 30.2. So take your tips.
Yeah, just leave it at flowers.
And we're really talking about small numbers here. We're reading our facts. It's more than our 22.
Times what? What is it? The
2.1 times the 30.2. What's that increase? Gotta be just a little over 6.
6.34?
6.34. Why don't we do that?
That would work. I'd vote for that.
0.6.
0.634.
What?
6.34.
6.34.
0.634.
Right.
Yeah.
My dozen.
Yeah, 0.634 for mill.
Right, no, I get
Right
it.
there.
Yeah.
I was not making that. No, that's not right.
That's not right?
If anybody here does math for a living, can you figure
I'm
this out?
telling you, I can't remember, is it 2.01?
So 30 the current is 30.2 mils, right?
Yeah, this is 30.834. So it'd be 30.834.
Yeah,
0.634. Yeah.
30.804.
Yeah. So 0.634 mils.
30.834.
Thank you.
30.8.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, how convenient. That went down again.
Good golly.
Just sign the invoice already.
I don't care.
Always, like,
I'm not a motor saver.
Well, so you can plug into your home
I think you're trying to get it.
computer. So I mean, I would be okay with a 0.634 mil
So
increase.
this is a rationale to going to CPI.
Mike, so we doing a straw poll here?
I'm still voting against it. Why? Because I think we should have, from the beginning, gone to referendum. So, that was my point in February, that was my point last month.
Well, where were you and Mr. Martina wanted to go to referendum?
I'm sorry?
Where were you and Mr. Martina wanted to go to referendum?
You're gonna wind up having to go to referendum sooner or later. And I'd rather have that answered. My point was, and I've been.
But your answer is going to be no. So I mean, that's.
Let's go into.
I'd rather know now that the public is not supportive of that type of tax increase, and then have a year and a half to start making the painful adjustments to make ends meet. rather than being at the last, running out to the 2021
If
year.
you only go to referendum
being
if you go
forced to do it,
beyond
and
the
then-
max, right?
Then we
Correct.
find out in May whether
next
the
year we go.
referendum passed, and then you have basically a month to do something drastic. That was my point.
Basically, if you went to the index year over year, you wouldn't need referendum.
Okay, so
We
we have,
maxed it out.
If we
CPI is
had
a
common sense
reasonable rate
increases
adjustment
every year,
for now.
we wouldn't be in this.
And two, their second thing is.
That's
we
our
did
problem,
the
we're
zero
catching
cost
up
budget
for-
basis.
For a board that hasn't done
Doesn't
anything in
change the
years.
fact of where we are.
But I don't think we need to go to, I don't think we need to go to referendum. Just letting you know. Even though that's a good faith estimate of what's happening in 5 years, there's still so many variables that could go up or down. In 5 years, I'm not as concerned with what that lack of fund balance looks like in 5 years. I am the lack of two.
So far, I haven't been a part of a budget where anything came down,
Like overtime on it.
where the
Well,
costs
we
came down.
we witnessed that this year.
Time and a half.
And that's to your point, Mike, that those steps need to be looked at next year, starting earlier by pressing, going from a zero cost, and then press at that point to say, it's not gonna work, you gotta lower this, find the money. It's not gonna work.
No, I just can't imagine trying to go to a May referendum, and then you find out, in the middle of May, that here's what your situation is, and you have a month. I don't even know how from the time you have your referendum.
Right, well, so I mean, there's really only one viable, so play the scenario out, right? So if you go to referendum and you get a no, right? So you're stuck at the max, and that's at the maximum Act 1. We're still out several years before we actually, can't meet the number. Now if you go to get to that year and you say, okay, we're going to be we're truly negative now unless you increase taxes by 5%. And if they vote no, then it's very simple. Obviously, it's only one way you can cut, right? Then you have to cut class sizes will go up somewhere, right? Now your high school might be at 30 kids per class or whatever. I'm just saying, so right. I mean, that's really the only way to make that budget work.
I know, I just never I would prefer incremental changes versus drastic is the last thing.
But that's what we're talking about right now, isn't it?
You're still not going to get there. Because you're missing the biggest piece, you're missing the biggest cost piece of this puzzle.
Okay.
all right, which is what I've said, there's other numbers, so, okay, so you're good at that number.
Yes.
Who else is good at that number?
CPI?
0.634.
So there you got your 5.
Yeah, that's for this year.
All right, move on.
Okay.
We're done.
All right. Well, if we're done,
We don't have to belabor
is
anything.
I'm
there?
gonna lobby for more, wait, I didn't get.
Well, what Mrs. Olson wanted 0.75.
Motion to adjourn? I should be
Well, I wanted to ask this public comment. I wanted to ask this public comment.
Public comment first.
Please step up to the microphone, sir.
There's no
Oh, there is no microphone. Please step up. Well, it's over here. It's over here.
Show yourself.
It's over here.
Austin's actually part of the.
Hang out with Jeff.
Yeah, there wasn't a seat. I didn't want to take anyone's
You're right,
spot.
so there's no time limit.
Okay, when I was plugging it in, I share your concern that at some point, we're going to have to pay the piper here. If you put 0.75 in for the millage increase and project it out, now, obviously, it's not counting the salaries and so forth, but as it sits right now, it was increasing towards the end. So I don't know how many.
You're saying year over year, 0.75.
Yeah, if you did year over year 0.75, and I know it's a tall order, but if that's the concern, at some point we're going to have to pay the piper,
The challenge is you vote on 7.5 with that in mind, right?
Right.
And then the board changes,
I understand.
And you're only voting on 1 year.
I lived that the last 10 years.
Yeah.
right? So then,
I understand.
I'm with you though, I get
See,
it.
that goes back to my argument of if you keep the rate millage raises somewhere in the middle, you don't get these swing boards of the anti-tax crew versus the do whatever it takes to do the best we can for the school board, right?
If you just
So-
steady as she goes, it doesn't get anyone riled up one way or the other.
Right.
And you just have a mind.
I mean, it was going up double digits. I remember when.
Oh yeah, like 2005 or something like that, or
Yeah, it was double digit increases. That was the anti-tax fervor. But no one voted against it when their kids were.
That's why we moved here, because it hasn't raised taxes for 6 years.
Mr. Scott,
I think school district value is more important.
I think I heard
Second.
an alternate proposal for the tax increase.
Or here,
Well, what was it?
no, we're done. We're done.
No, I think she had a good point. If you go in the middle there, go
Yeah, between,
0.7.
So in the middle would be 0.5. Right? You got 0 to 0.996, right? Middle is
He wasn't an AP math.
0.5.
Nice try. Throw it out there.
That's,
I
you're
support
saying
you.
7, the CPI was my,
See, I
Yeah.
base for 0.7.
I would too, but I did understand the rationale of sticking to CPI. It gives you a nice firm footing underneath that
for
number.
rationale and, and especially a PR, it's fractional.
And as I said, I don't get too wrapped up in what the numbers look like 5 years down the road. So the fact that that fund balance all of a sudden, that fund balance number all of a sudden goes from negative to positive doesn't light a fire under me in any way like it does Mr. Wolf.
Well, you were out.
So are we adjourned now? Is that
We're back to where.
Oh,
I was making a motion to adjourn.
I second.
Well, now-